Oh, I had to make the screen. Welcome to Cynthia. This is a fun book that we're bringing to the world, The Imaginist, Fairytales, Fables, and Folklore. And you decided to write a chapter that is really intriguing. It's called Nourishing Fae. Let's talk about your chapter and what's the inspiration behind birthing what our esteemed Sharyn Jordan and whatever her last name now is, because she's just celebrating her 75th birthday and getting married. What's the inspiration for your avatar?
Well, thanks for having me. This is a departure for me in terms of writing. Um, I haven't done any creative writing in quite a while. And when Sharyn approached me with the project, I thought, oh gosh, is this something I can do? And we learn so much by personifying the things that we believe in, personifying our connections. And I think my character, the dragonfly facing glory, is sort of a personification of some things that I've learned over the last couple of years. She's very much somebody who trusts her journey, and she's very much somebody who relies on the environment around her to kind of give the cues of what direction she should be going.
That's beautiful. And can you describe her as to why she's your hero?
She's very heroic in the sense that she perseveres. And I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but she definitely is somebody who stands up to sort of some fear-based beliefs and fear-based behaviors where she thinks she can't go forward from where she is, but gets into a situation where she has to. It's her only choice. And she relies on that environment around her to really give her the direction. So she's my hero in the sense that she keeps her eyes forward. She looks around for cues, but she keeps her eyes forward. And there are several times during the story when she could easily have given up. She could easily have given up, but she chooses to rest, and then she chooses to keep going. So I think that's important. It's a very brief story, which I think probably has a larger context and a larger possibility. But everybody looks to dragonflies for the wings, and she does have a wing that gets damaged during the story, but it's really her eyes. It's her eyes that continue to see the horizon and continue to see where she should be going.
So there's always a reason that we come up with these kind of stories. So what did you learn personally? Because I'm sure it relates to something that goes on in your own personal life that lets you to let your imagination flow to write a story on this nature.
Sure. So I work as a Feng Shui practitioner, and I also help people heal from trauma. That's kind of my 9-to-5 career. And just speaking of Feng Shui is very creative and sort of has a mystical side, a connection between heaven and earth. So I think the story is very much about my starting to build my life as a business person, and to understand that there are going to be obstacles, and to understand that there are going to be deterrents in the path. But that if you look around, that nature and the things around you will keep you in the direction you're supposed to be going. I think that as she gets going in the story, as she gets going on her journey, she finds that there are some elements, the 5 Chinese elements, that sort of help her through that. So I'll leave that to the story and for people to discover that in the story. But that she's got the innate ability right there. She doesn't have to look for validation. She doesn't have to look for, she's got everything she needs right there in that package.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure those are the things that you've had to learn in your life. As you know, part of that story is because it comes from the core of life lessons that
Sure.
that's beautiful. So the key takeaways that a person reading your chapter, yes, it's more of a fairy tale type of a story. But there's also a lot of learning within the pages of your pages from your chapter. What is the key takeaways that you hope somebody reading this chapter will take away?
I think the big word that comes out of it for me is trust and belief. And I think that she shows that by continuing on her journey when she knows there's fear, when she knows there's obstacles ahead, when she knows she hasn't experienced anything like what she finds in the forest. And so I think the key is she keeps trusting. She keeps trusting that her eyes and her wings are going to take her there, even when there's an injury. And so I think it's trust and it's acceptance that, yep, this is my path, and everything around me is telling me to do that.
Beautiful, very beautiful. You know, it's interesting because I work with so many authors, and as I work with authors, I find that many of their own personal superpowers came from the really tough times in their lives, and how they serve in the world today is based on what they learned from those experiences and what they bring to the world. So what did you feel like when Sharyn asked you to write a story? I know for me, I just couldn't get there because it's been a really busy year in publishing. And to make my mind go into the make-believe, to bring a story to the world, I just wasn't happening. How did you feel when I know you mentioned at the very start of the conversation, but how did you feel when she asked that question of you?
You know, Sharyn's somebody who's very intuitive, and she's very magical, and she has a very magical side. And she tunes into people in terms of the gifts she thinks you have to give to the world.
I know.
So I think when she contacted me, I was like, oh boy, my calendar's really busy. I'm not sure if I can do this. I came into it a little late. But when I started, I knew immediately it was a dragonfly. I knew immediately. It just, the minute she said it, I said, oh, I know who it is. And so to me, that character was hovering there just below the surface. And I think it allowed me to when you sort of step back into that creative mode, when it's bubbling, it gives the rest of your life perspective. It lets you get expansive because you're not stuck in the box and in the boundaries of your daily life. You get to connect to that mystical, you get to connect to the magical, and it definitely helps you expand.
It definitely does. For those that are reading this chapter, you'll just take a moment and pause and look at that dragonfly. That is one of the most, when I saw that picture, I was like, oh, it's breathtaking. It just took my breath away. It was so beautiful, and it is really sets the tone for the story.
Thank you. When I contacted the artist for this, I sent her my chapter. And I said, there's several scenes there, and I want you to make the illustration that you connect with, because I wanted to know her expansion, and I wanted I know what I was looking for, but when I contacted the artist, I said, I want to know what you see. And she picked the scene where facing glory confronts her biggest fear. And I didn't think there was a coincidence in that. And I'm not a believer in coincidences. And I think the universe opened up and said, this is how we need to see the character. So it really is beautiful. And I'm quite grateful for that.
Wonderful. So when you sit down to write, what is your practice? This is something that authors stumble along for a while, and sometimes they can start a book and 10 years later, they're still working on it. So in order to stay focused, how do you set the scene for yourself to be able to write even a chapter in a book?
Sure. I think first of all, I have experience teaching meditation. So I think you have to connect to your breath. You have to connect to the natural rhythms that are around you. I don't do a daily practice, but when I wrote this, I think it was very much about allowing the flow. When you work with writing, and I wrote a little bit of this by hand, it changes your brain patterns. And I think, again, it allows for expansion, But for me, the message is really allow the flow.
Beautiful.
Allow the flow of what wants to come. Mhm.
Very beautiful. Thank you, Cynthia, for really taking the time. And you have a quote in this at the beginning of your chapter. It says, Santosha invites us into contentment by taking refuge in a calm center, opening our hearts in gratitude for what we do have, and practicing the paradox of not seeking. Beautiful. Thank you for your beautiful contribution to this book, The Imaginist, Fairytales, Fables, and Folklore. And delighted to be able to have this moment in time with you.
So nice to see you again, Becky. I can't wait for the launch of this book. And thank you to Sharyn, who was so magical. I think people will really love this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I got to get over here and go.